it's recently become a trend that people are adapting newly public domain figures into bad horror movies. Last year we saw Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, and from the same director is Popeye the Slayer Man, which we watched a few days ago. Connor, what's the plot of Popeye the Slayer Man?
Popeye the Slayer Man is kind of a movie.
Kind
A
of,
bunch of
technically.
college kids. There's some college kids. There's mysterious college kid. There's guy who wants to make a film, and girl who's getting abused by her boyfriend. And they go to the abandoned spinach factory where the ghost of the Sailor Man, Popeye, is sitting there killing people. And then the abusive boyfriend comes after for some kill fodder. Then it turns out one of the girls' dad is fucking Popeye, and the mom is Olive Oil. And he's was eating radioactive, unsafe spinach that made him an evil horror monster ghoul. So Aiden, what did you think of Popeye, the Slayer Man, or whatever?
It's pretty much Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey again, where it's the cheapest micro-budget horror movie, where they got some guy and they put him in a Popeye mask and gave him like fake muscles, like weird Popeye arms.
Yeah.
And they said, okay guys, run around this abandoned factory that we got a permission slip to film in. And they run around screaming, and then Popeye comes, and in the most uncreative and boring ways possible, he like punches people to death. He scalps a woman, which has a really bad effect.
A lot of the effects are like, it's gore effect, but it's really just a pile of fake guts and whatever just dumped on people fairly indiscriminately.
Or like a guy gets his head squished and they just throw some red sauce on him. Much like Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, it's pretty much the most bottom of the barrel horror movie you could make. It's not really funny or interesting beyond the concept of being a Popeye movie. It's boring. It's really bad. Connor, what'd you think of Popeye the Slayer Man?
Popeye the Slayer Man, like a lot of these all of the public domain, all three of the public domain horror movies we've seen so far, shows no reverence for the source material. Whoever made this movie is not a fan of Popeye. They realized they could use Popeye in their shitty horror movie. Or they made the shitty horror movie because people have heard of Popeye and now that they can legally use Popeye in their shitty horror movie, so they make a shitty horror movie around Popeye, which I suspect is the story for all three of the movies.
Yep.
In this public domain masterwork. Popeye the Slayer Man is one of a few Popeye horror movies. It's kind of the new trend to...
apparently 3 all came out like yesterday.
Yeah, pretty much simultaneously. And, we're going to start seeing more of these because Walt Disney Company has stopped lobbying or has pushed the lobbying to the extent they can or the extent they're willing to spend on it. So now shit's copyright actually expires, as we'll talk about with Steamboat Willie. He's coming up here. But, stuff will start to become more like the actual, like, Popeye we know and stuff. But the problem is they're basically stuck to the source material of 2 to 3 cartoons. They really can't stray beyond that in terms of how they portray the character. So you got like loose aspects, like what do I know about Popeye?
Spinach, big weird arms.
Big weird arms, that's the gist. And that's what the director was allowed to use given the fact that they were basing it on whatever the first 3-4 shorts. And I just don't feel like much reverence for the world of Popeye. I don't feel reverence for Popeye. I've heard of Popeye like everyone else alive, but
I don't
like
think
everyone
anyone
else
has
alive, I
reverence for
don't care.
Popeye anymore.
There's probably like 4 boomers out there that are huge Popeye fanatics, and this movie's probably not for them because it's just a gory slasher movie, but like
Not
really
even
poorly
that
done.
gory, it's just really fucking dull.
No, I mean there's a lot of blood and guts. A lot of it's just like they dump it on people's heads and shit, and it's not that good.
Yeah.
The kills, like Aiden said, weren't that good. The plot of the woman who is abused by her boyfriend was strange, and she has a fake out death. And none of the characters are very interesting. The girl who's like the daughter of Popeye, that was like the only plot relevation they tried. It's not like the most original thing in the world, but they tried. The Popeye costume kind of looks like Popeye in like a weird freakish way, and they made an angle where he looks like Popeye because the spinach gives him powers, but it's radioactive or whatever, and they killed his wife, so now he wants to kill people like a spooky ghoul.
It looks a lot less awful than Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey.
Yeah.
It's a low bar, but...
I felt like Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey took some liberties so they could keep like the yellow and red color scheme of the more famous like Disney version of Winnie the Pooh, so they had to like lean it into parody and different enough, where this was able to just adapt Popeye for his strange look. I mean, overall, it's more of a novelty to just kind of see what someone does with it, like, is the reason we watched it, but it's very not good.
Nothing good was done with it, no.
So, Aiden, would you recommend Popeye the Slayer Man?
Absolutely not. It's fucking boring. No. Connor, would you recommend Popeye the Slayer Man?
Yeah, I'm with Aiden. Hard pass on this one. It just fails to really do anything interesting with the concept. They said we can now make a Popeye horror movie, so they quickly rushed out a Popeye horror movie. It's not particularly good for the horror genre. It's definitely a cheap gimmick to sell Tubi streams or whatever out of curiosity. I don't know what this release done, but it
didn't come to theaters unlike Blood and Honey.
Yeah, this one didn't come to theaters. In fairness, though, Popeye's a significantly less famous IP than Winnie the Pooh or Steamboat Willie.
Yeah.
Which reminds us, Mickey Mouse in the form of Steamboat Willie is now public domain. So, Aiden, what is your thought? What's the plot of Screamboat Willie?
Screamboat is the public domain Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse evil. They can't call him Mickey Mouse, but they can call him Willie.
Yep.
And they can have a part where they talk about how the old captain was named Walt and draw him just like Walt Disney and make corny jokes like now after 90 years he's in the public.
Yeah, the movie was definitely kind of meta.
Little meta. There are people on the New York ferry, and Willie, who's a mutant mouse, who kills them.
Yeah.
There's really nothing else to say. It has even less plot than the Popeye movie somehow.
Well, he's trying to find Minnie.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. That's true.
I mean, it's similar where it's like there's no plot and then there's like a minor twist at the end, or maybe not twist, but like motivational factor for the character. Both characters, Popeye's missing, Olive Oil's missing in Popeye, and Minnie is missing in this movie.
Connor, what'd you think of Screamboat?
I thought Screamboat was okay. I would have dared to say I liked it if the movie was 30 minutes long. This is another one where they kind of had to rush it. I felt like there were actually concepts in the movie that were funny. They wanted to make this like just goofy. It's a mix of a lot of things, which makes it shocking. That I somewhat like it. It's got Mickey Mouse as the main villain.
Yep.
But the kills are very Terrifier, which makes sense because they hired the Terrifier guy to play Mickey. You got this like intentional so bad it's good thing, like a Sharknado or something.
Yeah.
Mickey Mouse is throwing around dicks. Mickey Mouse's scale is very inconsistent. Sometimes he's about 3.5 feet, 4 feet tall. Sometimes he's the size of the man's penis after he chops it off. Unless that man's got like a 48-inch dong, then it seems implausible. But yeah, I mean the movie also just keeps contriving new characters. Like there's this core plot.
They're literally just characters who walk out of the dark and say, "I'm here to die."
There's core characters that are in this movie, and then the start of the movie is a bloodbath. The first half hour is a delightful bloodbath, and then after that, you kind of boil down to your main, like, 5 characters. So they keep contriving new characters to show up, like the horny person that wants to fuck the police officer, and the police officer gets his dick chopped off by Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, they got a girl to go tits out for this movie.
Yeah.
It's wild.
And then they made a realistic prosthetic penis that got caught up, and they used it as prop humor for the next, like, 10 minutes. He's running around with a cock and balls trying to hit people with it. Yeah. Like, it's really stupid, and it sounds like something I wouldn't like, but something is strangely charming about it. There's no reverence for the character of Mickey Mouse, and the movie even kind of comments on that by being, like, having some meta jokes when they explain Willie's origin with Walt. They're like, well, after 90 years, sometimes you can just start making shitty Mickey Mouse horror movies. And that type of stuff. Like, it knows what it is. We know what it is. But there's a problem with Popeye and Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey where they kind of pussyfoot around it. But this movie just owns that it's a cheap cash grab where they're able to use Mickey Mouse for a horror movie. So they made a soft Terrifier-esque movie with the Terrifier guy as Mickey Mouse because they could.
Yep.
And it's definitely a movie that was made because they could. There wasn't much thought put into plot. Continuity, like Mickey Mouse's general size, varies scene to scene. And the movie just really gives it an atmosphere of not giving a single fuck. But it's also kind of goofy and somewhat funny and enjoyable. I just think once they kind of went on a killing bonanza at the start and killed off a lot of characters, so it became a point where they just kind of had to contrive in new characters to kill occasionally to keep people awake, and then otherwise it was really boring people walking around the ship. So I think it's a movie that after like 40 minutes loses a lot of its momentum. But I think this is the closest thing to a real movie we've gotten from one of these public domain horror movies, and I suspect one of the few public domain horror movies ever that is going to do this, unless somehow I'm wrong, and in several years, I'm sure it'll be like once the novelty wears off, because right now Popeye's new to the public domain, Mickey Mouse, those are characters, and I'm sure we'll get the same shit for Batman and Superman, and the Three Stooges, and whatever the fuck else comes into public domain in the next couple years from like the marginally recognizable franchises from the 30s and 40s. And you know, it's never now the floodgates are open, so I don't think these types of movies are going anywhere. I think every year we're going to start seeing more recognizable characters from the 20th century start to hit this landmark now that Disney's unreasonable copyright dates have kind of finally come to an end, and it hasn't been a priority for the company to do this type of stuff.
Yeah.
Which I find will be kind of interesting. But I also think there's a level of the gusto kind of wearing off. Like, I think next year, Betty Boop horror movie, 1000% gonna happen. I don't know if like the Blood and Honey guys and shit are gonna do it, but
there's always gonna be someone willing to do that shit. But
I think unless we hit like a renaissance where people are like, okay, now we can use the Mickey Mouse character, and somehow I have a really interesting angle to come at it. Like that eventually happened. I mean, that happened a lot more from the start with like Dracula and Frankenstein, because the exploitation angle is a lot different when they hit the public domain.
Yeah.
At least in America.
Now you can just throw cheap crap on the Tubi. You don't have to fucking sell it.
Even Dracula and like Sherlock Holmes is a weird mixed bag at this point, where sometimes you have these aren't the best movies, but you got like Guy Ritchie and Robert Downey Jr.'s Sherlock Holmes, which would never be made today. But 15 years ago, before like Marvel and everything was like the solid, like we're gonna make a franchise, we're just gonna use whatever licensed DC Marvel character we can get. They'd be like, okay, Sherlock Holmes, $100 million budget, blah blah blah. And there's also some good Sherlock Holmes movies through the years, and there's plenty of like bad ones. I'm sure there's some that are like starring Eric Roberts as Sherlock Holmes, where he's like investigating Osama bin Laden or something.
Sherlock
like
Holmes in the 22nd century.
Yeah, surely there's a lot of crap out there as well. Don't get me wrong, but I think as the novelty wears off, it'll probably start to boil out some of the crap. There'll be somewhere it's like ultimate movie crossover where you got like Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny like competing horror slashers because someone fucking can. But I think like Popeye, we got 3 movies within the month of April so far. And I'm sure those aren't the only 3 Popeye horror movies that are coming out. Like it's a trend right now off of the marginal success of Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, which was a marginal success because it was the first to market Winnie the Pooh horror movie.
And the cheapest. I don't think we're ever going to see these come to theater again after this one. I think this might be the last one.
I mean, for now.
I'm sure occasionally one will slip through, but most of these are just going to be...
I think it depends, because we're going to get more of a proper Mickey Mouse is starting to form, because next year, like, Pluto's coming in, and then Donald Duck will come, and, like, I'm sure we'll get them in theaters here and there. I don't think, like, Betty Boop is coming to theaters. Popeye hasn't had a proper movie, nor has really been an icon of a living studio in a long time. Like, it's like Max Fleischer's version of Mickey Mouse, and Max Fleischer's been dead for 60 years, and his company's been dead equally as long. Like, now it's just like some sort of like copyright limbo where I think Warner Brothers has the rights, but I'm sure if Disney wanted to buy Popeye off of them, it's one of those franchises that's in the buy and sell limbo, where occasionally we'll get like a shovelware Switch game or like a IDW miniseries comic book or like a movie.
Tarkovsky was working on a Popeye movie that ended up getting canceled like 5 years ago.
I believe it.
And there was like the shovelware Switch game that came out.
Yeah, I mean, I just think
nobody gives a shit about Popeye, basically.
I think especially now Popeye is going to be a public domain character. Popeye didn't have enough interest to lead a movie in a long time, and I think he's iconic. He's just going to start... Shitty approximations of Popeye are going to start appearing on every bag of spinach at the supermarket to advertise their shitty spinach. And I just think it's...
most of the properties...
It's over for him.
Most
like
of the
Mickey
properties
Mouse.
over the next couple years don't exactly have the legs that Sherlock and Dracula do either.
Yeah, I mean, like, Mickey Mouse and a lot of his supporting cast are coming. The Looney Tunes will be soon after that. And then you got, like I said, then there's that wave of, like, Superman, Batman, Captain America. And then there's not a whole heck of a lot in, like, the 50s. But, I mean, it's just gonna... I'm sure this is just a thing now, unfortunately. Yeah. How much of it's gonna come to theaters versus stay in public domain, or stay on like Tubi and shit. I think solely depends on the modern sensibilities or like popularity of the character. Like enough people have heard of Mickey Mouse that making a weird gimmick horror movie you can send to theaters. And I think when compared to the other two, this one at least has some level of like care in it. The kills are there's some fun kills in there. Mickey Mouse is goofy, just gooing like Baby Yoda and crip walking and shit. Like he's fucking wild.
Yeah.
So is he great? No, I don't know if we'll particularly get a great one. Like no one's gonna make a Mickey Mouse movie with a big budget. Otherwise,
the Blumhouse Mickey Mouse horror movie.
This is probably about the top of the bubble before Disney starts combing it with a fine-tooth comb. Like if Warner Brothers said, I'm going to make a Steamboat Willie horror movie tomorrow, they would have to tread incredibly careful legally. I'm sure there's a level where Disney will start trying to get that shit. There's no point
in litigating these fucking micro movies, but
no.
Anything bigger than
like,
this
I'm
is going to
sure
draw some
in a way it's in fair use, but like, yeah, no, I think this is about the max we'll see before people are just like, well, at this point I might as well just like either buy a franchise or license a franchise or blah blah blah. And also like I think there's also just gonna be like an inherent level of schlock of I took the character of Mickey Mouse because I could and used him in my shitty horror movie. Like there's a level of like there's like a lack of prestige. Like I don't see maybe Jason Blum would like have Steamboat Willie show up in a gag as in like Cabin in the Woods 2 or something, but like I don't really foresee like a Steamboat Willie by Fincher. Paramount. Yeah, David Fincher's Steamboat Willie or something. So I think this is like pretty much as top of the line as it gets, and considering it feels like an amalgamation of Terrifier and Sharknado, the fact that I didn't totally hate it somewhat shocks me because I do not really care for those movies. So Aiden, what thoughts do you have on Steamboat?
Screamboat's fine. It's definitely not very good, from a realistic sense. I think it manages well enough. It's goofy and silly, and some of the meta jokes about, the whole public domain situation are fun. The Terrifier guy, I don't like the Terrifier movies, but he has like good physicality, and they do little physical humor jokes with him and make him meep around like Baby Yoda. And, it seems like they only made a costume from like the shoulders up, because a lot of the times he's like a little puppet or a CGI thing with Terrifier guy's face glued on.
Yeah, that was kind of fun. Like Popeye is just a guy in a suit, and granted, it seemed like that suit was a pain in the ass to get on and off. But like this Mickey, they kind of had to get creative, take like some like Gremlin style things where sometimes it's a dude in a suit, sometimes it's a puppet, sometimes it's CGI, sometimes it's just a pair of fake legs they are moving around in front of a camera that are being puppeteered. Like
you
they
can
were
tell
actually like
that
filming techniques.
You can tell that I looked it up, but you can tell that the guy who directed this was a special effects guy before this. Pretty obviously. He mostly worked on like fucking dog movies, but I guess like that's all the same technique. So sometimes you get a dog and sometimes you got a fucking puppet dog.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah. The first half hour, 40 minutes maybe are really fun. All the kills throughout the movie, you got some pretty good gore and blood splashes and over-the-top kills, like the captain getting his head cut off, or the girl takes her titties out for this movie, and then the guy's dick gets cut off. There's some fun kills, some fun gore. It's a fucking ridiculous, stupid premise. It has fun with it. It doesn't take itself seriously. It's got some jokes about the whole wacky situation, and it's honestly fairly funny throughout. The big problem is it kind of burns out like halfway through. They probably could have chopped off like 20 minutes of this. I think it's a little too long, and the back half is just not nearly as fun once the killing slows down. And they have to contrive new people to kill. And also the kills get a lot less, once it comes down to the core cast, they try to give them more dramatic exits instead of like ridiculous over the top.
Yeah, the first
Getting your
few
head
kills
sawed off
are like, what if a guy got or what if two girls got shish kebabbed by a forklift? There's a part where he blows up an entire room of people with
He
CGI
dangles a guy in the
electricity.
propeller and turns him into fucking salami.
Yeah.
Real strong start, burns out towards the end. Just some charming effects work, if not fantastic.
For what it is.
For what it is, yeah. It's surprisingly fun, in a way that the other two definitely aren't. The other two are fucking boring people in factories wandering around in the dark while a guy in the mask punches them.
See, I feel like this is equally cash grabby to like Winnie the Pooh and Popeye, but I feel like the guy's like, well, if I'm gonna make a cash grab, I also want to make a fucking watchable movie. Because like, part of the problem is you watch something like Winnie the Pooh, Blood Honey, or Popeye, and you're like, okay, not only is it a cash grab, you're just using the name of a character to lure people into watching dog shit, like kind of like
watching
the Asylum
shitty guy in a mask movies.
Most of the Asylum movies.
Yeah,
type of style.
The director's also a special effects guy, so this is like portfolio pieces for him too. So, that's something. It just a strict upgrade on the other public domain horror movies we've seen.
I mean, I could see this guy. He also had like a good depth of space for like the fucking boat, and it kind of gave like alien inspirations and stuff. Like there was actually like some thought. There were definitely some sloppy moments that I think like. Yeah. But I could definitely see somebody seeing this and like giving him like a mid-budget like Blumhouse movie. Like I could see him transferring this into something pretty successful where the Winnie the Pooh and Popeye guys are that's their shtick now. For the rest of time they're gonna say, oh, Leave It to Beaver's public domain. I guess Wally Cleaver's gonna cleave you up.
And even outside of the the meta jokes, there's some pretty funny gags. I like the cop guy giving like the big dramatic Spider-Man 2 speech, and then immediately everyone in that room gets killed.
There is no way he wasn't inspired by the Spider-Man 2 speech.
Mickey running the penis around. Yeah, I mean, like honestly, it's much higher quality than I expected, and than this concept deserved. Kind of impressive that so much effort went into this weird cash grab. But it's refreshing after seeing Winnie the Pooh and Popeye's things. Connor, would you recommend Screamboat?
Yes, I would. Even the most eye-rolling moments, like when they name drop the only person who's ever kind to Willie is being Walt fucking Disney, They're like, it's Walt freaking guy. Walter. We can't say his last name for legal reasons, but Walter was kind to Willie, and he was pretty pissed on how they did him at the end of the day. Like, I liked it enough. I do think... I really wish... I mean, I think at one point... I think there's a point where he wanted to transition it into more of a real movie, because obviously...
Yeah.
I guess, like, for both budget reasons and whatever, I think he wanted to, like, put a real plot in there. What I would have done, perhaps, is, like, I think part of it's that he put so much into the first half hour when I think those kills could have been dispersed across the entire hour and a half and made it a little more...
Yeah, it comes out...
Because the first half...
the fucking gate running.
The first half I was having a great time, and then the next, like, 30 minutes I was like... got a little boring, and then it picked up steam again at the end. I just wish, like... some of those kills were a little more staggered, or maybe there was like, I don't know, one or two more. Because like the Dick kill was 100% a 1000% pointless cutaway. Those characters never interact with the characters.
They don't even appear before the scene they die in.
From like a story perspective, everybody was like moved to the basement, and now I guess these guys just survived, and like after like a giant, basically like electrical explosion killed like 50 people, no one's starting to think this is strange. Like these two are just doing their own thing. Like it's fine. Do that like 2 more times. I absolutely do not care that much about the story. But yes, if you like goofy, weird horror movies, like, dare I say, if you're like a fan of like Terrifier, which I'm not at all, you'll have a good time at this. But even just like slasher movies, or if you're like, that's a weird gimmick, but it's probably total like weird cash and dog shit, like the Winnie the Pooh movies and shit, I would say there's a little more to it. If you really feel inclined out of curiosity to watch one of these public domain movies, then I think this is, so far, I don't know if there's any we missed, but from the ones we've seen, this is like the pinnacle of the public domain cartoon character horror movie subgenre.
Well, apparently this same guy made a Grinch one a couple of years ago.
Oh, well that must just be a parody film, because I can't imagine Grinch is public domain. It would have been made by Dr. Seuss in like the 50s.
I don't know.
Who knows? I'd be interested to see that, I suppose. Maybe. But, you know, I liked this one. So, Aiden, would you recommend Screamboat? I would have called it Screamboat Killy. I would have just went all the way with it.
Yeah, I recommend it. It's a good time for what it is. It's probably the pinnacle of what we can ever expect from the fucking public domain horror movie genre. It's got over the top kills. It's funny. It burns out. I would have trimmed it. I would have trimmed it down like 20 minutes and spread the kills out a bit more evenly. But especially that first 40 minutes is just kind of. It's a good time.
Yeah.
Surprisingly decent. Definitely like B-movie schlock, but for the right person, you know, if you're a fan of goofy, weird slasher horror movies, it's good.